Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 308, Always Work in Progress. If you've been in my world for any length of time or followed my work for a while, you will have heard me say on numerous occasions, we are all work in progress. I've never checked in with you to understand how that lands or had any feedback from my community. But over the seasonal break, I became very present to a dilemma. This isn't something that I'd been aware of previously, well, not consciously anyway, but I suspect it's been rumbling around in my subconscious for a while. And why do I think that? Probably because these thoughts came tumbling out almost fully formed, mostly coherent and pretty complete. And that doesn't happen with me, and definitely not as often as I'd like. So in this episode, I'll be unpacking the dilemma I identified around always being a work in progress. And as I share my experience, you should be able to figure out where you sit or stand on this. After all, it may not be a dilemma for you. I don't have to go back too far in my experience as a change agent. Yep, that's the title of my master's degree. Be that change as a training consultant, coach, facilitator, or supervisor, to recognise that I felt a certain degree of pressure to have an answer, if not the answer. Do you know how exhausting and actually debilitating that degree of pressure is? So why was I doing that to myself? Good question. But I realised I'd put myself on that pedestal because how could I expect others to trust me if I didn't have all of the answers? Talk about a poisoned chalice. During my downtime, once my always busy head had a chance to slow and allow things to ruminate, I figured out that it all boiled down to what I thought people expected of an expert. I've been caught out more than once buying into something presented by someone claiming to be an expert, and I've seen through the smoke and mirrors. And this has caused me to be particularly cautious around someone who doesn't have the relevant credentials. Yes, experience is important, but I've also realised just how important credentials are to me. They actually really matter. I decided to explore this a little and discovered that it stems from an underlying belief and respect that a person has invested in all sorts of ways, time, money, effort, in their knowledge and skills development. Now it's this that leads into part of my dilemma. You see, I do not consider myself an expert, and I have no desire to be referred to one. Strange, right? Perhaps this has something to do with a barbed comment that used to be thrown around my professional circles, in that an X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure. Joking aside, I've never warmed to the idea of being an expert. They conjure up images of an all-knowing, infallible, smart aleck, and frankly, I'd hate to be thought of as any of those. Added to which, even as a recovering perfectionist, I wouldn't hand on heart class myself as all-knowing, even with very nearly 40 years of experience as a learning and development professional and a lifetime of experience as an introvert. And I can't deny that it also stems from having worked with rather too many predominantly pale, male and stale colleagues who prided themselves on being all-knowing experts. So, I'm clear that the whole expert malarkey is not for me, but, and you may say this is semantics, I do consider myself an authority. What's the difference, you might ask? Indeed, I did ask just that to see if it somehow helped me to understand my reluctance towards one and my preference for the other. And what do you know? It turns out that others are facing or have faced a similar dilemma because I found articles focused on helping transition from expert to authority. That's not quite what I set out looking for, but it highlighted the dilemma pretty clearly and offered some unexpected reassurance that I'm not on my own with this. In my search for clarity, here's what I found. An expert is generally considered as someone who has exceptional knowledge and a great deal of experience in a specific field. They have worked hard to refine their craft, gain relevant qualifications, and develop expertise. Now, there's nothing problematic at all in that definition, and I'll admit to having spent years doing just those things. And yet, still it sits uncomfortably with me. So I read on and found that experts are considered pretty much a commodity these days. And having the skills and knowledge doesn't automatically translate into sharing. Yep, I get that and don't like the idea of being a commodity. Plus, too many of my expert colleagues would only share if it looked good for them. They seem to have that knowledge is power delusion. Now we get to the difference. An authority is more than an expert in that they are recognised, visible and sought after for their insights and thought leadership. Boom! Does it sound too conceited to share with you that I'm happy to be recognised and sought after? Whether it does or not, that's the reality, and I'm not going to hide it, especially from you. So it turns out that being highly skilled is simply not enough. We need to know how to communicate, share, and showcase our knowledge. I acknowledge that being an expert is the first step, but being an authority is where it's at. I think this is the distinction I'd been looking for, and yet my dilemma about being a work in progress still exists. Can an authority be a work in progress? Here's where my thinking went next. I reflected on the extent to which I trusted those past colleagues of mine, the ones who already knew so much and let everyone know that they knew without actually sharing their knowledge. The answer, in short, was that I didn't trust them very much at all, and I certainly didn't respect them. I'll admit to being impressed initially, dazzled even by their displays of knowledge and showmanship. But once I saw behind the curtain, just like the Wizard of Oz, I realised that most of it was smoke and mirrors, and much of their knowledge was tired or outdated. I'd go so far as to say that I detected a complacency, an arrogance even, that destroyed their credibility in a flash. Well, in my eyes anyway. So my personal dilemma about being a work in progress has included what might happen to my credibility in your eyes if I were to openly share my learning with you more often. The rough and the smooth, the painful and the joyful. And I'll not prettify, diminish or pretend that wasn't a genuine concern, because it was. There was a part of me that wondered whether saying out loud like this, "I'm still learning," would quietly chip away at the trust you place in me. Would it be seen as honesty or hesitation, transparency or weakness? Would my credibility be enhanced or depleted? And to be really candid, that question has stopped me in my tracks for quite a while. Because credibility isn't an abstract concept or weasel words when it relates to your life's work. It's personal, it's hard-earned, and once lost, it's not easily regained. So I sat with that discomfort for some time rather than rushing to reassure myself. What helped was thinking about those I trust most. Not the loudest voices, not the ones who seem to have an answer for everything, but the people who notice where the gaps in their knowledge are and do something about it developmentally. The ones who don't deny the existence of the gaps. And crucially, the ones who have the humility to share their learning journey rather than just their conclusions. The thought leaders I trust are those who keep abreast of the many changes life and society are presenting us with, and those who choose to take appropriate action. This isn't the time for digging in and pretending it isn't happening. Nor is it about chasing every shiny new idea that comes along, bouncing around like a pinball. It's about being discerning, about noticing what genuinely needs to be integrated into our model of the world in order to remain authentically relevant. We all need to update our thinking, to keep up in our field, or in some cases to stay ahead of the curve. And that's when the penny really dropped for me. I choose to continue to learn, and I'm not shy about admitting that I'm a lifelong learner. Not because it looks good or ticks a box, but because it's necessary. I continue to add to my qualifications, as I did last year with my coaching supervision accreditation, because standing still in this work simply isn't an option for me. It's by continuing to learn and integrating that learning that I can serve my clients to the best of my ability, rather than dishing up last year's soggy pudding with tastier custard and a prettier bow. I have such clarity on this now that I've added this very topic into the Frustrated to Flourishing journey, and I can see that an element of it is a very handy addition to the Flourishing Introvert playbook too. Because this isn't just my dilemma. I'm pretty sure that many of you are navigating something similar. So for those of you in professional service careers, or frankly any career actually, don't compare yourself with the self-proclaimed experts. If you're struggling to differentiate yourself from the possibly numerous experts in your field, consider how you might stand out by showcasing your knowledge in a way that genuinely helps others. Not by dazzling them with your brilliance, not by overwhelming them with technical detail, but by being useful, relevant, and real. I strongly recommend you move away from being perceived as a commodity, and instead I invite you to take up position as an authority, one who adds value by sharing generously. It's a far more fulfilling way to proceed, and it paves the way for a successful future. And as for my commitment to you, I will be much more open about my learning, my ahas, and yes, my stumbles throughout 2026. After all, we are all work in progress, and there's no shame in that whatsoever. I invite you to stay with me on this journey so we may journey together. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.